Hello everyone, and a very warm return welcome to my channel. On this video we're going to be talking about an interesting visit I did just today, where I went to visit a family or a couple with a pair of Frenchies. The Frenchies were fighting each other, and so I went along today to have a look to see what was going on and to put together a little plan of action so we can bring about some calmer, more relaxed behaviour in the home. Young Treacle, young Sugar.
I mean, we can't eat in the same room as them, can we?
Right.
We have to part them.
You couldn't come in with a bag of
Yeah,
crisps.
if you come in
No.
with a bag of crisps,
You could come in with a drink and have a drink.
Yes.
You know.
Yeah.
But the eyes are on you then, aren't they? If you
Yeah.
come in with a rattle of crisps or
Good.
something.
Well, I think what we need to do is to set up some sensible ideas, methods, some sensible boundaries for the dogs, so that as soon as you do start to eat or have something that they know is of high value, that we can send them to their beds, tell them to stay there, and that you then are able to keep them away from you physically.
Yeah.
yeah,
You know, and then there's no fear, because obviously we know already that food and affection is the real trigger for them, challenging each other. But if we control their behaviour around those aspects, then I think you'll be onto something. Now, as you might imagine, when two dogs are fighting in the home, that can be anything from little minor scuffles and disagreements all the way through to scenarios where the dogs are coming away blooded. The gentleman in this family was inadvertently bitten just recently when he attempted to separate the two dogs. That isn't a case of aggression to people. It was really, the analogy was that the owner had put his hand in the midst of two dogs that were having a fight. And of course, when you do that, you do run the risk of being bitten. And that's what happened. And so I should think then that that was the final straw in many respects. It was the last stage that prompted them to contact me. As I suspected, when I got there, it was clear that one of the dogs in particular had a very determined approach about keeping the male owner, I think in particular, to herself. She did not wish to share him with the other dog. Now, the two dogs, they're both female Frenchies. One is 19 months of age and one was 4.5 years of age. Now, of course, the 4.5-year-old dog was just under 3 when the newest Frenchie arrived. And that dog had become used to having the owners all to herself. I can see it, I get it. And then she has to share the owners with this little upstart of a Frenchie which has joined the house. Now, a lot of dogs could come to terms with that and things would rub along quite nicely. But as it turns out, and this is often the case in cases I go to see, that this older dog was not particularly amenable to sharing her owner or food, by the way, with the other dog. Now, when we have one dog, it's pretty straightforward. Two dogs, well, we have a pair, but when we have 3 dogs, we have a pack. And the dynamics can change quite dramatically between 1, 2 and 3 dogs. Of course, how it changes and what behaviours we see can very much depend on the temperament of the dogs. But the more dogs we have, the more managerial we need to be with those dogs. We need to let the dogs know that we don't condone or allow any poor behaviour in the house, and especially in terms of aggression. Okay, and so we spent quite a lot of time talking about little subtle ways in which the owners could increase their control over the dogs to project in a calm manner the fact that the human adults were leading the proceedings, which we talked about at great length. Now, on a practical level, the very first stage to stopping dogs from having constant bouts of aggressing, especially the older dog, would instigate the behaviour. So if the younger Frenchie was coming in and looking like it wanted a slice of dad's affection, then the older dog was not having it. Now, in the first year or so, the younger Frenchie was not countering the older dog's behaviour. And I think the older dog was able to manage the younger dog without too much difficulty. The younger dog would capitulate, move away, not take things any further. But inevitably, as the younger dog is finding her feet a little bit more, I think she as well is thinking, I don't need to put up with that, and that she's learning that she could fight back. But of course, we don't want that occurring in the house. We don't want any fights in the house. We are looking for calm, relaxed, happy pet dogs. It's all we're ever looking for. It's what I profess to bring to people, is this option of having, or the chance of having, calm, but the operative word is pet dogs. These are not working dogs, not dogs which are doing things out in public for the benefit of others. These are pet dogs which are there to be enjoyed and loved by their owners. Now, very often owners are very good in terms of scales of giving lots and lots and lots and lots of love and affection and time and space for their dogs. But that needs to be evened out a bit with some guidance, some sensible boundaries, expressing to a dog, if and when necessary, that aggressive behaviour is unacceptable and won't be tolerated. That all sounds like, Nick's getting a bit carried away, won't be tolerated. It sounds very authoritative. But I don't really mean it in that sense. But there was and is on this case a need for some straight talking. Because in fact, as a result of the excess of the affection and not enough sensible boundaries, they were already contemplating moving one of the dogs on, rehoming a dog, which won't be necessary, I'm glad to say. I'm pretty confident, as much as I can be after a first visit, that the dogs will be able to come to terms with some new rules and measures, that the owners will be able to de-escalate a lot of this behaviour much, much more quickly. Now, I'd like to give you a little outline in terms of the sorts of things that we discussed today, that they will be putting in place for the next month or so. And then when I go back, we'll look at that behaviour again and to sort of pick apart what's going well, and we'll congratulate that and maintain that, but also to look constantly at what is left on the table, so to speak. What behaviours are still outstanding? What are we still concerned about? And that's the beauty of the second visit. But after the first visit, or the first visit will really be seen as a reset opportunity, particularly in a case like this. Let's get back to basics. Let's simplify what we're doing and how we're living with the dogs. Simplification is often a really good idea to weave through the future comings and goings and interactions, rather, with those dogs. So what sort of measures do we put in place? Well, in no particular order, I'll list them out for you. But having said there's no order, it was clear that all the behaviour was really manifesting in one front room of the house. And that's, of course, where we have the TV, the sofas. That's where they spend their time and relax. So because the behaviour was pretty much only occurring in that space, that does certainly make it a lot easier to manage. Now, often when we have a case of resource guarding, which is, of course, what we're discussing here, because a resource is anything a dog wants to keep to itself. Now, that could typically be the owner, examples, the owner, its bed, food, toys, the dog's body. Sometimes a dog will not allow its body to be looked at. It can be possessive of that. Okay, so resource guarding is a very widespread subject, but we know that the dogs were specifically resource guarding what we might call just simply affection and closeness to the owner, and that the older dog was not allowing the younger dog to indulge and partake in that affection as well. So what we're going to do is to bring the dogs, both of them, off of the sofa for a period of time, off of the owner's laps, to remove really the spark and the flames that were constantly flickering and moving around that was causing the issue in the first place. Stopping an unwanted behaviour, how we do it, of course, is a slightly different conversation, but stopping an unwanted behaviour in the first place is an essential step to getting a cessation of that behaviour in its entirety in the long term. Okay, we need, of course, to do plenty of other things as well as stopping the dog from practicing that behaviour, and I'll touch on those, but putting that sort of roadblock in place from the very outset so that we really bring the incidences of poor behaviour from here right down to virtually nothing for a good period of time. Normally I find my visits are 4 or 6 weeks apart, but that period of time is often remarkably effective, especially when we stop a dog from practicing an unwanted behaviour, and that we can then fill that vacuum, so to speak, with things that we approve of and that we encourage the dogs to do. And in this case, it will simply be a case of bringing the dogs away from a space that they feel that they have to be in before they can relax, i.e. on the owner, and teaching them positively over some little successive sessions that spending time on their own beds is okay, that they don't have to be on the owner before they can enjoy some settled behaviours. How do you get a dog on a bed when all it really wants to do is to jump on and be on and possess the owner or keep them to themselves? Well, you'll hear as I go through this case and others that I'm often using in the home what I call the fixing point method. And this simply entails a nice, normal, regular soft bed on the floor, and that right next to that bed would be usually a regular length lead. So, and that lead is attached back to the wall just behind the bed. And so the length of the lead should only be, so let's say, for example, the dog is only this big. This is its bottom and this is its head. So the lead itself only needs to be about, well, from this point on the wall to here, where the dog's neck is. Because as long as the dog can sit up, turn around and lie back down again, that's all that lead is really looking to control. We don't want the line so long that the dog can carve an arch, so to speak, in the room. So the fixing point method, we can introduce positively and gradually. So we can sort of say, come on your bed, good girl, sit down, clip the lead on, good. We can settle the dog down. We could maybe give a chew or something if that helped create the calmness. And we make these sessions quite short to begin with. And then as the dog settles, as the dog learns that it doesn't or can't be on the owner all of the time for that settled behaviour and experience, then it will, and I see it virtually on the first visit, in fact a couple of photos which I'll drop in for you, to show you that when the dogs were effectively being ignored, when they know that jumping up on the owner is futile because the owner is saying no, off, and that when we guide a dog onto a bed or onto a rug, often in some cases, as was the case today, and that the dogs can start to really experience relaxation in a more regulated space, i.e. not on the owner. It's lovely, of course, to have a dog on us, to share affection and time and space with a dog. My own dog comes up on the sofa most evenings, but only upon invitation. And I know that all other aspects in her behaviour collectively are exactly how I would like them. There's obviously I don't have a multi-dog household. I sometimes have 2 dogs here. But this is, once we know that our dog is on the right end of the scale in terms of desirable behaviour, then we can give more privileges and access. If, however, and as you might imagine, the dogs I see are cases where things are not quite over there, they're more in the middle and below, let's say, the halfway mark. Well, when we're over here, we can look at privileges and access that the dog has, or dogs have, and reduce them until, because naturally I often find that the dogs will naturally come back up the scale, okay, demonstrating better behaviour, calmer behaviour. And as we move up that scale, down the line, in the timeline of the process of the behaviour visit, then we can consider reintroducing, re-allowing these privileges that we may have stopped short term. Okay, so we may well be doing things short term that I could see, often I see when I'm asking an owner to bring the dog off their lap, to place it on a bed, to ignore the dog more, they often look crestfallen. And I sympathise with the owner, but I'm always keen to reassure that this is not a forever measure, and that indeed, and in any event, we had to do something today. Things had to change. And we can't bring about change on that type of behaviour just by, for example, waving bits of chicken. It is a situation and a set of behaviours that almost certainly always requires more clarity and more guidance, more boundaries from the owners. Okay, so we're looking exactly at what's happening, what's missing, so to speak, in the current setup. And by bringing that in and applying it for a period of time, we can then see the dogs go through positive change. Now, I was very impressed today how both dogs were able to take direction without any complaint. Not all dogs do that. And so I can only refer to today's case, which is what I'm doing. But we have to keep in mind that we need to be flexible in our approach. We may need to do more with some cases in terms of control and management. But normally I'm looking to do what you might call just enough. Is it just enough? I don't want to overdo it. But it's important that I don't miss the issue either. If the issue is here, it's no good doing too little, and then because we're ineffective, we're missing it. But equally, we don't want to overcook it and to, cause concern in the dogs or to create new issues by overdoing it. So usually we just need to hit it somewhere in that sort of ballpark space. And that, of course, we can do over a lengthy consultation, and we're talking and thinking things through together. So we will be bringing the dogs off of the owners onto the floor, ignoring them selectively. Okay, because if our dog is on the bed, on the floor, and we are sitting down with a sandwich, let's say, a spot of lunch, or as the example was given to me, a packet of crisps, so that's absolutely fine, then we don't want dogs right in our space. And we need, if the dog is on the bed and we're looking across going, oh, she's a good girl, she's beautiful, and we're giving her faces and look like, oh, I'm sorry, because we as the owner may feel guilty that we're implementing this change. But remember, it's a change for the better. We're aiming to bring the dog away from a negative little cycle of events, which in themselves are causing stress for the dogs, over into something which is much more positive. We, of course, can't sit down and explain all of this to the dogs. So how do we convey the changes that we're looking for? Well, they are done in owner actions, the ones that I've just been touching on, and the way we are interacting with the dogs. I usually leave owners with what you might call a layered approach. So rather than coming in and saying, to solve this problem, you need to do that, it's normally one big thing. It's normally a case of saying, let's do a bit of this, a bit of that, Let's do a little bit of that as well. Let's do some of that. Let's do less of that, more of the other. And so we normally end up with what I would call a layered approach. And in fact, just looking over at my notes, I left them with 7 specific points today. I'll read them to you as just as headings. So I've already touched on some of these, but number 1, access to you and the sofa. Number 2, beds on the floor. 3, learning to ignore. Number 4, the use of house lines. So the dogs will be trailing little lines in the house. Now, the owner had already been doing that for a week or so prior to my visit and had already seen an increase in control and a slight reduction, I think, in the number of events that they were seeing, negative events. Dealing with visitors and their own homecomings, okay, because there's a lot of excitability around there. That's a subject which is often discussed on my visits. I won't get into it too much on this video because it didn't pertain massively to them, but it did come up in conversation. We spoke a little bit, point 7 here, about dealing with the younger dog's behaviour in public, and she's very nice in public, but she just thinks that every human and dog and thing is there for her benefit and to have some fun and messing about. It was put to me that she effectively would have run across a road, or I think she did run across a road to greet some people. So we can't have our dog doing that. That's dangerous and could end in tears. So we discussed about the introduction of starting a recall using a long line on her, although she was only a little Frenchie like this, lovely little thing, but you know, she was a real compact bundle of energy and muscle. So we need that. We need it regardless of the breed, be it a Great Dane or a Chihuahua. We need our dogs under control and engaging with us. Okay, not running away from us, even if it is to something that the dog thinks is wonderful. We need to have control of our dogs in public. All right. One thing here, stopping escalation. So let's talk about that for a moment, because we did see a couple of short-lived moments during my visit where the older dog, actually I was showing them, the couple, how to use the fixing point around the bed, and because I was down around the bed myself on the floor and the younger dog was next to me, the older dog was not happy about this and her ears went back and she started to growl. Now that is an escalatory behaviour, okay? And in my very simplistic and straightforward thinking, I explain that as the escalator of aggression. And we don't want the dog escalating. We don't want to interrupt and deal with behaviours when they're at step 7, 8, 9, 10 out of 10. We need to be dealing with it down at level 1 and 2. Now, even if we see a precursor to poor behaviour, such as a bit of stiff body language or the dog beginning to look like it's not relaxed, then we catch it there as well. What do we do to catch it? It does depend on the dog and what the dog is doing. But I found today that by simply pointing at her and telling her, be quiet, in that instance, with that dog, that was enough. It quite often may not be, but it was today. And so then the owner's seeing how she responds to me. Naturally, I'm a stranger. And sometimes as a stranger, I have an advantage over the owners because the dog doesn't understand fully or how much it can get away with me. That's probably the simple version of what I'm trying to say here. And dogs are very often well practiced at knowing how far they can push their owners in that existing setup. So we did discuss the subject of correction, a sensitive subject, but we never correct through volume or fear or harshness of handling. Okay, the correction really is about taking away the dog's ability to escalate, to find some we're taking away the dog's ability to find a sense of satisfaction. And yeah, I think that's probably the best word in that behaviour. Okay, and of course, as I was saying at the beginning, we're preventing the dog from practicing that behaviour in the first place. So I thought it was a particularly interesting case today. I was only there for just over a couple of hours, and so that in that time we were able to identify what was needed, to set out nice and clearly what they'll need to do in the coming weeks, and that I am as confident as I can be at this stage that by implementing those measures over a period of time, the dogs will settle down. Dogs prefer to live in a calm, secure environment. Okay, it's not to say that the environment itself was insecure or that the owners were doing anything incorrect. It's a case of what we're adding in to this behaviour, as well as what we're taking out. Another way I describe this to some people is to say, well, they're like, well, we've got some major levers that we can push forward and pull back, such as affection and attention. That's a big lever. How much access the dog has to us or not. Okay, so when we look at a select handful of basic levers, and it has to be said that in a sort of domestic setting, which is where virtually all of my work is carried out, in the home as well as out of the home, because again, we're dealing with pet dogs, that a lot of those behaviours are being discussed on a regular basis from case to case. Okay, I've probably done quite a dense sort of section of work just recently, and virtually all of those, less so on today's visit, but on virtually all of the cases thus far, we've been looking quite in depth at how we're engaging with the dogs, the amount of affection and attention we're giving the dogs. That, of course, needs to be given longer term on our terms when we are ready for that, and also when the dog is ready, i.e. when the dog is calm. Now, a dog might be ready to jump over you all the time, all day long. That's not ready for interaction and affection. So there you go. I wanted to sort of talk this case through with you. I'd like to do a few more of these and to see what sort of conversation it could generate, because if you have any questions based on the sorts of things I've just been discussing, put them in the comments below. I'd like to hear from you, because I know that there is in all the work I do, a large percentage of it is a degree of repetition, going through these basic concepts. Okay, so I'm being careful not to generalize, but I'm generalizing. So there we go. I hope to give you an update on this case as I return in March. So stay tuned for that. That would be nice if we could do sort of a little video after the first meeting. These are the measures that we've put in place, and then a video on the return after the return visit, and I can update you then. Okay. So thank you for watching, and until the next one, bye for now.